9 years I had kept the grievance ledger for Bramwell Hold, and 9 years running I had stood at the founding stone on the anniversary and read the year's disputes aloud, the way the charter said a clerk should, and 9 years running the stone had said nothing back. I want that on record before I tell you the rest, because people will want to make it sound like I always knew. I didn't. I thought it was a rock with old carvings on it, same as everyone else, and I only kept coming back because somebody had to hold the ledger, and I was fool enough to volunteer the first year, and too stubborn to quit after. The stone sits half buried at the edge of the North Terrace, on a plain the survey teams called Dead Rock, and moved past without a second look. It's taller than a man lying down, carved along one face with lines nobody in 3 settlement generations has read, and the scholars who came out from the capital in our second year spent 4 months with their instruments and left with a report calling it inert basalt, pre-settlement, no detectable energy signature, no further study warranted. After that, the only ones who still came were the Hold's founding families, once a year, to drink watered wine, say the names of the dead, and let the clerk read the ledger. Tradition outlasts curiosity out here. It has to. There isn't much else that does. This year the ledger had one case that mattered, and everybody at the terrace knew which one before I opened the book. The Calders and the Reyeses had been fighting over the irrigation line since spring, whose channel, whose water rights, whose father had dug what, and it had gone from bad words to a formal complaint to, 3 weeks back, an accusation that old Sim Calder had forged his father's survey marker to move the boundary 60 feet onto Reyes ground. If it stuck, Sim lost the terrace his family had worked for 2 generations. If it didn't, the Reyeses lost water they needed to get through the dry months. Nobody had proof, past what people were willing to swear to, and half the Hold had stopped speaking to the other half over it. I'd spent 11 nights going through both families' old records, because that's the job, whether anyone thanks you for it or not. I found the truth in the margin of a 40-year-old water log nobody had opened since it was filed, a note in Sim's father's own hand, admitting he'd shifted the marker himself, in a drought, to save his crop, meaning to move it back once the rains returned, and never doing it. Not malice. Not even really a lie anymore, after 40 years. Just an old unfixed wrong that had calcified into a boundary everyone assumed was true. Sim hadn't forged anything. He'd inherited a mistake and never known it. I could have kept that quiet. Half the terrace would have thanked me for it. Let the old wounds scar over. Let the families cool down on their own. Keep my head low and my job easy. That's not what a clerk swears to when he takes the ledger. So when my turn came at the stone, with both families standing on opposite sides of the gathering like a fence had already gone up between them, I didn't read the year's small complaints the way I usually did. I read the waterlog entry out loud, word for word, and said whose land the boundary actually belonged on, and said it would cost the Reyeses nothing they hadn't already lost 40 years ago waiting for a return that never came, and it would cost Sim Calder a terrace his family had farmed on a mistake they didn't make. I put my palm flat on the stone the way I always did to steady myself when a reading went hard, because your hands shake less against something solid, and I said it was the truth whether anyone at that gathering liked hearing it or not. The stone was warm. Not sun-warm. It was past dusk. The light long gone violet over the plain. The rock should have been giving heat back to the air, not holding it. I felt it climb up through my palm into my wrist before I understood what I was feeling, and by then the lines cut into the face of the stone had started to fill, not with light exactly, more like the carving remembered it used to hold light and was only now recalling how. Pale gold at first, low in the deepest grooves, then rising up through every channel at once until the whole carved face was lit from inside the stone itself, and the shapes I'd looked at for 9 years without understanding resolved, for one breath, into something that looked less like decoration, and more like a ledger of its own. Old cases, old verdicts, carved in a hand that had been keeping score long before Bramwell Hold existed. Nobody at that gathering moved. I heard someone's cup hit the ground and not one person looked down to see whose. Sim Calder had gone still with his mouth half open. The Reyes boy who'd been ready to spit at him 20 seconds earlier had a hand pressed flat over his own chest like he was trying to keep something in. The voice, when it came, didn't come from a direction. It came up through the stone, into my hand, and into the bones of my arm, low and even, the way a verdict sounds when the person reading it has read 1,000 and isn't rattled by the 1,001st. The verdict was always yours. I didn't understand it, not at first, but the stone kept speaking, plain words now, and told me what 9 years of silence had actually been. Not sleep, not a dead relic waiting on dead instruments to wake it. It had been waiting on a true accounting, spoken whole, at cost to the one speaking it, the way its makers had bound it to answer to. Every year I'd read small honest complaints about fence lines and missing tools, and the stone had judged each one worth its silence, because the truth in them cost nobody anything to say. This year I'd told a hard truth that put my neighbor's welcome to me at risk, and told it anyway, because the ledger doesn't get to lie just because a lie would be easier to live next to. That was the whole of what it had ever asked of the ones it chose. Not blood, not a crown, just a hand willing to hold a hard truth up in the open and not flinch carrying it. It called me bearer, and it meant the word the way the old carvings meant it, before the language wore down into ours. Not a title you're born to, but one you're handed the moment you prove you'll carry it honestly, and can't ever hand back once you have. The gold in the grooves settled to a low, steady glow and stayed lit, the first time in 3 settlement generations anyone had seen it hold that way past a single breath. Sim Calder came forward first, once the stone went quiet, and told the Reyes he'd give the terrace back himself before the ledger made him. That's not the ending people will want when they hear this story secondhand. They'll want the light, the voice, the old stone waking up. But I was the one standing there with my hand still numb from it, and I can tell you the ending that actually mattered was a stubborn old farmer walking across a terrace he'd have died defending a season earlier, to make a wrong right because a rock had told him what honesty was supposed to cost. The scholars came back out from the capital inside the week. By the 3rd day we had survey trucks at the terrace edge, and a team unpacking instruments they swore were better than the ones that had called the stone inert 9 years back. They measured the glow, argued about the carvings, asked me 11 ways to describe the warmth climbing my arm, and none of it moved the stone a degree. It sat dark under their lights exactly as it had sat dark under mine for 9 ceremonies running. The instruments had never been the wrong tool. They'd just never once been holding a hard truth when they touched it. I told the lead scholar as much, and she didn't much care for it. Maybe she's right that it'll answer to proper study eventually. I've been wrong about that stone for a decade, so I'm not the man to bet against anybody's patience. But I've started keeping a second ledger now, private, where I mark honestly, before I ever bring a complaint to the terrace, whether the truth of it will cost somebody something, or whether it's the easy kind of honest that never asks anything of the man telling it. I don't bring the easy kind to the stone anymore. Doesn't seem right, spending its attention on truths that never once made me flinch. Sim Calder still farms half that terrace. He gave the other half back within the month, same as he said he would. And neither family talks about the waterline now, not because the wound healed clean but because both of them watched the ground itself weigh in on where the truth actually sat. I still keep the ledger. I don't set my hand on the stone anymore unless I mean it. Not for balance, not out of habit. Only when I've got something in the book true enough to be worth what it costs to say. The stone doesn't answer the easy years. I've learned to be glad of that. Some inheritances aren't meant to come cheap, and I've come to think that's the only kind worth being handed at all.